lymphatic system. What do you know about it? Right on. We have a reader. It's a network of vessels. Network of vessels and organs. When we think of vessels, we usually think of blood vessels. These are different vessels. These do not carry blood. They carry a fluid that we call lymph. Sherry, where does that lymph come from? It comes from interstitial fluid. You are exactly correct. So this system consists of a network of vessels and organs that filter that fluid, the interstitial fluid, and the job is to return it back to the circulation. Here is what the lymphatic system in your body looks like. Lymphatic vessels follow blood vessels. So they're found in similar locations to your blood vessels. Sometimes they follow the arteries more, sometimes, mostly, they follow the veins more. The lymphatic vessels, they follow your blood vessels. Both, depends on where. We'll get into the specifics later on. When you see the lymphatic system portrayed in a book, they always show it in green. Alright? Because they want you to know it's not red, arterial blood. It's not blue, venous blood. Except what location in the body switches red and blue? Pulmonary circulation is different. They want you to know that this isn't blood, so they draw it green. And it's representing lymphatic fluid. So this system is composed of a network of vessels and organs that filter the interstitial fluid, sometimes we refer to that as tissue fluid, and return it to the circulation. When we say returns it to the circulation, we mean what circulation at that point in time? We mean the blood specifically into the veins. Basically, the lymphatic system consists of three parts: a network of vessels, the fluid within it called the lymph, and the little organs associated with it, the primary ones that filter our lymph nodes. However, we will definitely talk about the other lymphatic organs as well. You have your tonsils, you have your spleen, you have the thymus gland, you have bone marrow, and you have this diffuse lymphatic tissue spread throughout the body in different areas. And we'll talk about that as we go through this. Because it's not filtering lymph, and it's not made mostly of reticular tissue like these organs are. Okay? And it has so many digestive functions. And it's right there receiving blood straight from the digestive tract. Good question, Reed. So I think we need to see a picture before we go any further. They have provided multiple pictures for us here, but I always like to draw this. Because sometimes it helps people to see a drawing. I think you already know we're going to have to open and close that program because it was not writing where it was supposed to. Oh, much better. If I draw this, what are we talking about? Very good. That's a capillary. Tell me about a capillary. It's okay, it's a blood vessel that's made for exchange. It's the largest blood vessel, right? The biggest around. It's got the thickest wall. No, it's exactly the opposite. These are the smallest blood vessels. They have the thinnest wall. In fact, the wall's so thin, how many layers is it? One. Of what kind of cells? Squamous epithelial cells. So we say it's made of simple squamous epithelium. Right? So capillaries allow this to happen. Oh, they also allow this to happen. And when the fluid is out here in the body. We're just going to put a few little body cells out here for fun. We call the space out here the interstitial space. So the fluid out here is called the interstitial fluid. Interstitial fluid and the interstitial space. Now that interstitial fluid is very similar to blood, except there's two things in the blood that are too big to basically get out, for the most part. You know what's in the blood that's too big to get out so it doesn't leak out here and go to the cells? Well, what components of blood are too big to get out of the blood? Well, all of your blood cells. We don't want those leaving, right? And most proteins are too big to leak out. They stay in the blood. Well, we already know this. If our proteins leaked out of the blood, we would lose blood volume. So we may lose a few proteins, minor amounts of protein, but not most of it because proteins function as solutes. Solutes help to maintain blood volume. Remember we call those plasma proteins back in the previous chapter? So here we have it. I'm just recapping you about blood a little bit. Here's the blood flowing through the body. When it hits a capillary, exchange can occur with the tissues. Fluid comes out. It bathes the cells. Does some of that go into the cell? Sure, absolutely. Do cells do things with it? Maybe put wastes out? Sure, they do. And then some of that fluid eventually goes back. Really, most of it. But on average, they like to say that roughly 10% of the fluid will stay around the cell. As interstitial fluid. Well, let me ask you a question. What if this minute 10% stayed, and the next minute 10% more left and stayed, and then 10% more left and stayed, and 10% more left and stayed? What would happen out here? We would get so much fluid, we would swell up, right? So there must be a way to drain the fluid, the interstitial fluid, that stays around the cells. And that's where our lymphatic system comes in. So this is a type of lymphatic vessel. This right here is small as well. So this is actually a lymphatic capillary. And I'll draw this a little fancy. You'll see a picture that they drew in a second. These lymphatic capillaries, they have little fibrous cords, little connective tissue that anchors the lymphatic vessel, which is pretty neat. It anchors it to the tissues. And so as we get fluid out here, and as the fluid, the pressure builds up out here, look what it can do. As the fluid comes here, it just pushes this little flap open like that. And the fluid can move right in here. That's pretty cool. Once we're in here, we call the fluid lymph. It's no longer called interstitial fluid. It's now called lymph, or lymphatic fluid. Once it's in the, what kind of capillary is this? It's a lymphatic capillary. Right, a special capillary. Well, these little lymphatic capillaries, they're all over your body. Do you remember the picture we saw a while ago? That looked like, what's hiding from me? That looked like this? These are the large lymphatic vessels. The tiny ones, the capillaries are everywhere, and they're not even showing us the capillaries. These are just the big ones. Just like when we see blood vessels, we see the big blood vessels, right? We don't see the little capillaries. Little capillaries are all over. So wherever you had blood capillaries, you're going to have lymphatic capillaries to drain the tissue fluid as well. That's the way it works. So our fluid collects. In the lymphatic system, these lymphatic capillaries start to collect and form larger and larger and larger lymphatics. And eventually, they take this lymph and they put it back into what? They put it back into the blood. So let's go see a picture of that, because I don't want to dirty up this picture by putting a whole bunch of stuff on it. I like to make this one nice and neat and simple. So this is a lymphatic capillary and a little overview of the lymphatic system. So there, look, here we have body cells. Do you see that? This is just generalized tissue in the body. What are these vessels right here? The blue and red. Those are capillaries. Look, blood's coming in the arterial end. It spreads through the capillary, goes out over here, the venous end. And look how the lymphatic vessels, the little lymphatic capillaries are all around there too. What are they there to collect? Interstitial fluid. Good. Also called tissue fluid. Here, we see the little lymphatic capillary. Tell me two things that look different about this capillary, or maybe even three, compared to a normal capillary that we draw. Oh, right on. See, I didn't even say that yet, Reed. This one has an end. It looks like a finger, right? It's got a cap on the end. It's not open to another vessel. It's just sitting there and it's blind-ended right here. So there's no flow over here. This is the end of the capillary. Fluid can only go one way, back the other way. So this, whatever tissue's out here, it'll drain it and it'll take it a certain direction, won't it? Cool. We'll talk about how it goes a certain direction in a little bit. What else is special about this capillary compared to blood capillaries? Okay, the flaps. Look at these little mini flap valves right here. Because we have these anchors, it can push on the wall, and that wall forms a little flap valve that will open up and it will allow stuff to move in. So you're right. You both said it in different ways. It's how it exchanges. This isn't so leaky. This is made for material to come in, right? Not really to exchange. It's more made for material to come in. When the pressure is great out here in the tissues, it exerts pressure on the wall. It pushes whichever part's not anchored, it pushes it in and it lets fluid move in. Until what? Until the pressure in here is great enough to push back on that flap, and then no more will move in. That's really pretty cool. It is a one-way street. Very good, sir. I don't get real super fancy on the names of each of the groups of branches of lymphatic vessels. I just want you to understand the concept. They start small and they get larger. There's a nice little zoom up of what we've already seen. Very cool. Blind end capillaries. Now, why are lymphatic capillaries more permeable? And why can they take up larger things like cancer cells and debris and pathogens and even proteins, if they happen to have proteins in the tissue? Because, right, blood capillaries can't, but what is it about them? It's those flaps. Those flaps are a lot larger than any fenestrations or pores in a capillary, so it lets larger material in. That's good and bad. It's one way that cancer cells spread. That's the main way cancer cells spread. Because those openings can get so large, cancer cells can get in there and they can spread through the body. Well, that's not cool. However, what is cool is any proteins that leak out of the blood, that accidentally get out of the blood, they can go in the lymphatic system and they can get returned to the blood. They just follow the pathway to get returned to the blood. This is kind of cool. You don't have lymphatic capillaries in your teeth. Interesting. You don't have them in the central nervous system. See, we have special fluid all around your central nervous system, don't we? Tell me what that fluid's called. Cerebrospinal fluid. So it will perform some of the functions, take up the excess. You don't have it in bones or bone marrow either. Now this next bullet there, I like to show you a picture. Now we're going to talk about some special lymphatic vessels. We've mentioned they're all over the body except for a few tissues like teeth and bone. It's real easy in your mind to link teeth and bone, right? And now because I said in your mind link teeth and bone, you can say, oh, my mind's working with my teeth and my bone. They don't have lymphatics in my mind, my brain, my teeth, my bones. You got it. Is that crazy, Reed? You don't have this. This is a new picture I put. You will have it after class when you download it again. This is your gut. Oh boy, we haven't covered this in lab yet. This is a couple labs from now. This is your digestive tract. This is your small intestine. See? It's a little tube. What do we call the opening of any tube? A lumen. Notice this lumen is ridged. Do you see that? It looks like a tire tread on the inside instead of the outside. And it goes around the wrong way or whatever, but, you know, just think of it like that. It's all grooved and ridged. Look, it's got these big folds that we see here. They have a name. We're not necessarily needing to learn these names yet because we'll learn that in the digestive system. But here's what we see. Upon those folds, upon those bigger folds, see these little teeny tiny ones right here? Okay? Those little teeny tiny folds are little finger-like projections. Invisible pretty much to your naked eye. You wouldn't really see them as clear as what we're seeing this. Well, kind of do. But go here. When we look at this, these little projections, which you don't need the name for yet, they're covered in cells. They're covered in epithelium. Can you tell me just from looking or from your memory from AMP1, the digestive tract from your stomach to your anus is lined by what kind of epithelium? Simple columnar epithelium. And it can have goblet cells. Look, there's some goblets right here. So here's the simple columnar. Notice it's surrounding this entire finger-like projection. Millions of those in your small intestine. Each of these little fingers that you see sticking up, it is called a villus. And this villus right here, its surface is even more highly folded. My goodness, you might remember microvilli from AMP1. When we get to digestive, we'll talk about it a little more. So let's think about this. We had that big tube that if we zoom in, look right here, this one thing right here, that is one villus right there. I zoom up on it, here it is. We cut it open and look, what do we see in here? What's red and blue? What kind of vessels? If they're teeny tiny and visible. Capillaries are in here. Why? If this is the digestive tract, why do we have capillaries in here? We like to use the word absorb, right? If it's the digestive tract, we've eaten our food, we've swallowed our food, it's gone to the stomach, it's got torn apart mechanically and with certain chemicals. It goes into the small intestine, the duodenum, it gets torn apart even more, and now we can eventually start to absorb it. Absorb it across the lining. That means that the nutrients that are out here, they get absorbed across these cells and into the blood right here, into your capillaries. The nutrients are now in your circulatory system. But there's one nutrient that's too big. Fat is too big to get into a regular capillary. All right? So fat is absorbed by the lymphatic system, these specialized vessels. They are called lacteals. You see them right here. I can't highlight it when I'm on this mode. Lacteals. They are specialized lymphatic capillaries present in your small intestinal lining. Really, they're in the mucosal portion under the epithelium. That's still the lining. Their job is to absorb fats because fats are too big to get into normal capillaries. So in the lymphatic fluid that's coursing through your digestive tract, can you imagine what it looks like if you just ate at McDonald's? Ooh. When that lymphatic fluid has a lot of fat in it in the digestive tract area, they give it a special name. Instead of just calling it lymph, they can call it chyle. C-H-Y-L-E. A little bit different than most guys with that name. Spell it. So let's look again. Here is the small intestine. Here is a specialized lymphatic vessel made for absorbing what nutrient? Fat. What do we call this vessel? No, it's got a special name. Lacteal. You got to own that. Lacteal. You know why? Because the fluid that travels through there is milky. It's oily. It's fatty. So it's thicker. It's milky. Lact gets you thinking about lactation. Makes you think milky. So that's why they call them lacteals, because they carry a milkier fluid, and we call that fluid chyle with a CH. Well, where does that fat go? It goes where all the other lymphatic vessels go, and it travels up through here, and it eventually goes back to your veins, specifically the subclavian veins. The subclavian veins is where all lymphatic fluid returns to the circulation. Through what veins? Subclavian veins. Okay. Very good. Very good.